Well, I've wanted for a long time to talk about this topic because it's really kind of changed my life in a way. You'll know what I mean in a second. First of all, I'd like to tell you a story that President Boyd K. Packer told. He was in Africa dedicating chapels. And I think if I remember correctly, he said we had to dedicate 8 chapels in 7 days. So he was very busy. And the day before he was to go home, the people that were his hosts said, "Hey, we're going to take you out on safari." And I don't know if you know this about President Packer. I read his biography and I just loved it. But he loves animals. He does a lot of painting and carving even of little birds and things. They're really good too. And so he was excited to go out on safari. Well, they were going past these water holes and he saw this certain water hole where there were no animals. And he said to the driver, the guide of the Jeep, whatever, how come there were no animals at that water hole? And the driver said, "There's crocodiles in there." And President Packer thought, there wasn't enough water in there to conceal a crocodile. And so he asked him again, "Really, why were there no animals at that water hole?" And he said, "There's crocodiles in there." President Packer said, "I thought he was having some fun at my expense." And so I asked him again, "Seriously, are you being serious? Why were there no animals in that water hole?" And the driver turned the Jeep around and drove up kind of close and said, "Look." And had President Packer look at the water hole. And he still thought, "I don't see anything there." And then slowly, gradually, this crocodile in the mud started to emerge there. And President Packer thought, "Oh, there's crocodiles in there." And this is when the guide said, we had a young man, I think he said from England here, and we told him not to go beyond this certain place, this fence, and we told him not to go beyond that. But one day he saw something shiny or something and wanted to go out beyond there, and we warned him, but he went out there and, what's funny, shiny? He saw something dull out there, and I must have it, it's dull. And so he went out there and he looked, and they said, "This is gruesome." But he said, in a couple of minutes, a crocodile had him, and there's nothing we could do. And the point, I think, of President Packer's story, he called the talk "Spiritual Crocodiles." You can find it if you want. You can be looking right at something and not see. Now, I happen to know the rest of the story, well, a little bit of the rest of it. There's a man, I actually gave this talk a few weeks ago at this stake, and this man in the audience came up, but I met him before. His name is Lyle Shamo. And he came up and he said that, he's in charge of the audiovisual department of the church, the director or something like that. Well, he is the one who found some footage of a crocodile attacking and killing a wildebeest, I think it was. I haven't actually seen it. But apparently he just throws it around. It's really graphic. And they contacted President Packer and said, "Hey, we've got this footage. We're thinking we might make a movie for seminary out of your story about spiritual crocodiles." So they showed it to President Packer, and Brother Shamo said President Packer watched it and didn't say a word. And then at the very last, he said, "They'll never forget it. Use it." And some of you have seen that in seminary, and it is graphic. But this is the portrayal that he was saying was Satan is like that. You can be looking right at it and not see. Now, I had a roommate when I was at BYU that could not see those. Remember those 3D things that you look at kind of cross-eyed and something 3D shows up? And he just thought we were making fun of him. "No, really, go cross-eyed, Mike. There's something in it." "No, you guys, there's nothing in there." And we kept telling him, and finally we hear this voice come out of the kitchen. "Oh." And suddenly he saw, but he was looking right at it and he could not see. Okay, we talked about a crocodile. Now I want to talk about a frog. This is an old analogy. You've probably heard it before. If you take a frog and drop it in a pot of hot water, it jumps out, they say. I have never done that to a frog. It sounds kind of rude. But if you take a frog, drop it in some hot water, the frog goes and jumps out, right? Now, if you see, there's certain benefits of not being in a chapel. You can grib it. And nobody goes, "Someone make him stop. Yank him off of there." Anyway, so you drop the frog in, he jumps out. Now, if you take a frog, and this is the way the analogy goes, and drop him in a pan of cool water, and then just kind of walk up and turn up the heat a little bit, and then go away for a while and turn up the heat a little bit, the change is so gradual, he doesn't notice what's going on, gets comfortable, and pretty soon you've got Kermit-y soup here, right? You've got a cooked frog. And if you remember, Elder Holland, just in the last General Conference, he said, as one observer stated, if you turn up my bathwater 1 degree every 10 minutes, how will I know when to scream? Do you remember him saying that? Same kind of thing. Well, this is interesting because I'm old. Now I know that I only look 25, nod your heads politely, but I'm actually 27. No, I wish. And before I was born, there was this television show called The Andy Griffith Show. Now I just love it. Keith will tell you. I have about I'm about 200 episodes of The Andy Griffith Show on tape. And I've seen them all. My poor wife. This is not the kind of thing you bring up when you're dating, you know. It's just not very macho. I have 200 episodes of Andy Griffith. You know, she'd be like, take me home now. You know, so I didn't tell her until later. But I've watched all of them. That's about 100 hours of television. And guess what? In 100 hours of Emmy Award-winning television, 6 Emmys, I cannot find one curse word, ever. Not one instance of immorality, anybody in the show, or even an innuendo or a joke about it. But things are different. See, I was dropped in the pot when it was cold, and you're being dropped in the pot when it's hot, you young people that are here, and I defy anybody, this will sound bold, to find me an episode of Friends where there aren't curse words and immorality and jokes about immorality in every episode. And things have changed. Something's cooking in here, and I think it's us. And that's what this talk is about a little bit about television. In fact, I'll show you. The purpose of this presentation is to, and you know, I'm so dumb, I left my glasses at home. So it says right there, it says, families and the law of chastity are consistently under attack in the media. That's number one. Number two, there is no such thing as the family hour. And some of you are going, I've never heard of that anyway, so I'll explain, okay? Much of the present programming is spiritual poison, and it's going to get worse. It's also intellectual poison and a waste of time. And your home will be a better place with less television and fewer video games. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Families and the law of chastity are consistently under attack in the media. President Harold B. Lee, I just love it when prophets use quotes like this. And this is one of my favorites, so if you've heard me before, you've probably heard this. But when prophets use words like the greatest or the best or the worst or the strongest, you know, and this is one of those. Satan's greatest threat today is to destroy the family and to make a mockery of the law of chastity and the sanctity of the marriage covenant. And that is 1972. This is back when the number one show on TV was probably Happy Days or something like that. This is a long time ago, but he's a prophet. And 31 years ago said, destroy the family and mock the law of chastity. The family is in the crosshairs of Satan. And boy, you just look around. And I really think this is true. When I was a teenager, what we heard about mostly, well, when my siblings that are older were teenagers, it was mostly word of wisdom. It was drugs and stuff like that. And I really think things have shifted, and now, man, this is it. This is the one. And I think it will be till the end of the world, as we can all witness. How's Satan going to do that? Well, he could use magazines or newspapers, but we all read different ones of those. But 98% of homes in America have at least one television set. More than 2 out of 3 homes have at least 2 TV sets, and more than a fourth have at least 3 TV sets. So that might be the way that he can do it, is use television. Now notice this, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, television watching is tied to desensitization to violence, obesity, teen pregnancy, use of alcohol and drugs, and just look at that list. Yeah, isn't that what every young woman would want, to become a desensitized, obese, pregnant alcoholic? No, probably not. And look at this. American teens see an estimated 14,000 sexual references and innuendos per year on TV, yet only 150 of these references deal with sexual responsibility, abstinence, or contraception. And I did the math. Okay, that's 150 over 14,000. I think I got 1.07%. 1/100th of the time, they're talking about responsibility or about abstinence. The rest is 99% of the time, it's the other stuff. A survey of R-rated movies in 1992 reveals that sex outside of marriage is portrayed more than sex within marriage by a ratio of 36-1. Now that would be mocking the law of chastity, don't you think? Elder Mark E. Peterson, here's another great quote, said, humanity will rise or fall through its attitude toward the law of chastity. Said that in 1969. This was an ad from a Sports Illustrated magazine. In fact, somebody just emailed me and asked me, now this is Sports Illustrated. And it says, guaranteed to break at least 20% more commandments than any other Sunday night lineup. And that's an ad for the USA Network. That is not a premium, not an HBO type network. That's just one that you get with cable, I assume. Another ad, this is from a few years ago. Notice the movie title is Hexed, and underneath it says, a comedy about sex, violence, and other family values. Now, they don't say it that way on the radio. I remember distinctly driving around once many years ago during the Beverly Hills 90210 era and hearing this ad on the radio. Tonight on Beverly Hills 90210, you'll never guess who goes all the way. Join us at 7. Now what they could have said was, tonight on Beverly Hills 90210, the truths and values you embrace will be mocked on every hand. Join us at 7. But I hope you're seeing that that's really what's happening. And yeah, it's getting mocked right and left. And that wasn't happening back in the days of Andy and Barney and Mayberry. I didn't tell you, the reason I collect so many of those is I do a Barney Fife impersonation. And again, since we're not in the chapel, maybe I could. Does anybody know who Barney Fife is? Okay, are you ready? All right, everybody, clear out. There's going to be trouble. You better lay low if the lead starts to fly. Okay, that was Barney Fife. Oh, thank you. Yeah. You're nice. See, now, you just wouldn't do that in front of a girl you were dating, would you? Because she has to really like you a lot. And I did that in front of a mirror once, and I thought, John, you should never do that in public. And my wife, Kim, is legally blind in one eye, and that explains a lot of things. So anyway, notice this. We have to be careful about mocking things that are from God. This is section 63, verse 58. For this is a day of warning, and not a day of many words, for I, the Lord, am not to be mocked in the last days. Okay, next point we wanted to make, there's no such thing as the family hour. And some of you going, I've never heard of that before. Well, they used to call it that. They used to call prime time the family hour, when you could feel safe to bring your kids, gather on the TV and watch Bonanza or something like that. And there's no such thing anymore. Here's just a couple of articles from USA Today. The headline, just look at the headline, Primetime TV getting more violent. Next, 1998, despite ratings, raunchiness grows during the family hour. Now I have a clipping from the Deseret News here from 1995 by Scott Pierce. And the first 7 paragraphs just say item, and it's talking about a new fall show. Item, in the season premiere of Friends, a female character feeling rejected by the man she loves. I won't use the words he does. Breaks the law of chastity. Next, in the premiere of the new comedy Almost Perfect, an unmarried couple breaks the law of chastity. Item, in the premiere of Can't Hurry Love, young unmarried female lead breaks the law of chastity. Item, in the season premiere of Wings. And it goes down, and then the next paragraph after the 7 shows says, what all these shows have in common, besides the fact that they all deal with adult sexual situations, is that all of them air between 7 and 8. And that's why it's just not safe. You can't figure if your kids are watching TV, you're fine, because there's no such thing as a safe time, especially with some of the talk shows and stuff. It's just bleh. It's an anti-family hour. It's not a family hour. Next, much of the present programming is spiritual poison, and it's going to get worse. Newton Minogue, he was the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, and he gave a speech in 1961 to the National Association of Broadcasters. Gave a speech to the no, this would be a gutsy thing. He's talking to the National Association of Broadcasters, and he says, I invite you to sit down in front of your television set when your station goes on the air and keep your eyes glued to that set until the station signs off. I can assure you that you will observe a vast wasteland. Now, if you make fun of Hollywood, what do? They have ways, and they got back at Dan Quayle a few years back. Do you think they did something? There was a new show they were coming out with, one of the classics of our time, called Gilligan's Island. And so when they named the vessel, they named it the SS Minnow. The minnow would be lost. The minnow. Remember that? Remember Thurston Howell III? Good heavens, Lobby, I've been nubbed. That was another one for you. And yeah, I read that in the paper. I thought, so I got on the internet. Yeah, sure enough, that's why they did it. They named the minnow after Newton Minnow. Well, later, Better Homes and Gardens did an article, and they interviewed his daughter, Nell. And she said, today, TV isn't a vast wasteland. It's a toxic waste dump. It's in your February 96 Better Homes and Gardens, and she's right. Toxic is like poison. Listen to Elder Worthland. Some programs are filthy and evil and are poisoning the minds of God's children today. Likewise, many movies and video cassettes are blatantly corrupt and evil, making their viewers insensible to the promptings of the Spirit. And boy, if that isn't Satan's strategy, I mean, that's it. Look at me for a second and imagine a huge, powerful warrior. It's not hard, right? And then finish my sentence. Breastplate of righteousness. I've got the armor of God. Shield of faith. Loins girt about with truth. Good. Helmet of salvation. Feet shod with preparation of the gospel of peace. Now, if you'll notice, I am totally defensive. What would I leave out, though? Sword of the Spirit. I think that's fascinating. The Lord didn't send us into this violent, corrupt world unarmed. And all of you on your 8th birthday, most of us on our 8th birthday perhaps, received a gift so priceless. The Doctrine and Covenants calls it the unspeakable gift of the Holy Ghost, and that's your sword. And if you've really got a weapon, Satan's first effort is going to be to take it away. Get you to watch TV shows, go to movies where they say, I'm sorry, you can't have that in here. And they take your sword. So I think Elder Worthland's right. Making their viewers insensible to the promptings of the Holy Spirit. Satan has made the television and film media among his most effective tools to destroy minds and souls. Guess who said this? Now, I may have been to one of your schools recently, and if you know this, don't say it, but just the rest of you that don't know it, guess. TV's poison. To grow up and not to have a sense of responsibility, to have everything taken care of, to be plopped in front of a television instead of being read to or talked to or encouraged to interact with other human beings is a huge mistake. And that's what happens to a lot of children. Any guesses? Usually people say, you. No, I don't write that well. Or they say some church leader. No, it was Madonna. I heard that on the radio and I thought, And so I went and bought Red Book, the only time I've ever bought it, in January 97, page 102, and sure enough, Madonna said that. Now, folks, when Madonna becomes the voice of reason, it's time for all of us to take a hard look at ourselves, okay? When it's not the ensign saying that, but it's Madonna, we ought to be saying it too. My goodness. Let's go from Madonna to Mahatma. Mahatma Gandhi said, this is a good quote, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. What happens when someone has dirty feet? It leaves footprints, doesn't it? And you remember President Benson said, the mind through which this filth passes is never the same afterwards. Speaking of the bad movies and stuff. And I think it was, it was Elder Dallin Oaks that said once, the body has defenses to rid itself of unwholesome food, but the brain won't vomit back filth. Once recorded, it will always remain subject to recall. I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. Who's in charge of your eyes and ears? You are. You get to choose what you put in there. Now, I know you're going to say, yeah, but I hear language at school. I know, that's different. Heavenly Father's not going to hold you accountable for things you heard by accident. But if you go to a movie and pay money for it, turn on the channel, deliberately, he might be held accountable for that. So we got to choose wisely. Let's ask President Hinckley. These television writers and executives are the people who, through the medium of entertainment, are educating us in the direction of their own standards, which in many cases are diametrically opposed to the standards of the gospel. And Newsweek actually did an article about, they interviewed television writers and executives and asked them what they believed and how it compared to the rest of the country. This is in your July 20th, 1992 Newsweek. Believe adultery is wrong. Hollywood writers and producers, less than half, thought adultery was wrong, 49%. Everybody else in the country was 85%. Have no religious affiliation. Hollywood, 45%. Everybody else in the country, only 4%. Believe homosexual acts are wrong. Hollywood, 20%. Everybody else in the country, 76%. Believe in a woman's right to an abortion. Hollywood, 97%. Everyone else in the country, 59%. And I like to call it sometimes not Hollywood, but Hollowwood, Hollowwood or Hollyworld, because what we're doing is we're getting worldly lessons all the time. Hollywood will say, hey, we're not shaping society, we're reflecting it. We're just reflecting what's already out there. And we look at these things and we say, no, you don't represent the population in general. Look at how different the numbers are. This is from the Intercessors for America newsletter, June of '88. Only 700 people, writers, producers, and actors, produce 75% of all TV programming. According to a Lichter-Rothman survey, 86% never or seldom attend a church or synagogue. In fact, I've got another stat in here, which is, I thought, kind of interesting. Religion is virtually invisible on network television, a recent study concludes. Scholars from 3 universities who monitored 100 primetime TV shows aired by ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox determined that references to religion rarely appear on the screen, and when they do, religious beliefs or practices are seldom presented in a positive light. The survey found that 95% of all speaking characters on TV programs have no identifiable religious affiliation. And that's what's so weird. I mean, religion is part of people's lives. I read in a book by Zig Ziglar once that more people attend church or mosque or synagogue on any given weekend than go to all the NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball games combined. That was nice to hear. And the fun thing about Andy Griffith's show was there's an episode where they're sitting in church and Gomer's falling asleep and Barney loses his place and Andy has to show him where they are in the hymn book. It's just the same. You know those people have been to church because that's exactly what happens. You lose your place and somebody points to the hymn book of where you are and the preacher says something loud and half the people are startled like that. And Andy talks about going to deacons meeting and choir practice and prayer meeting, and he gets asked to teach Sunday school, and religion was part of their life, like it is ours, but you just don't see that anymore. This is a little family circus cartoon where the girl is pointing, and she says, "Billy said a television word." And see, there was a time when this cartoon would not have made sense. There weren't television words. Hollywood actually had their own rules to guard against certain things that they would say. Not anymore. President Packer said once, "Profanity is more than just untidy language, for when we profane, we relate to low and vulgar words, curse words that are low and vulgar, the most sacred of all names." They mix in the name of God with some of those other curse words. And listen to President Packer. "I wince when I hear the name of the Lord so used, called upon in anger, in frustration, in hatred." And when I first read this, I had to ask myself, do I wince? Do I wince, or have I become used to it? This is Doctrine and Covenants 63, verse 61. "Wherefore, let all men beware how they take my name in their lips." And sometimes we become kind of used to it. We call it being desensitized. I noticed an article written, a letter to the editor in Deseret News on September 8th of 1998 by a Dennis Lisenby. And it was brilliant. I'm going to paraphrase a couple of spots. But he just described the plot of a movie that was popular at the time. See if you recognize it. Girl feels constricted by parents' expectations. Girl rejects parents and attempts suicide. Boy appears and saves girl. Boy is parents' worst nightmare. He smokes, drinks, uses coarse language, has no money or prospects, and is knowledgeable in the ways of sex. Girl immediately falls in love with this heaven-sent boy. Boy initiates teenage girl into the rituals which he claims produce eternal bliss. She smokes, makes obscene gestures, and breaks the law of chastity with the boy in the back of a car. Of course, this final act marks her passage into the mysteries of adulthood. Then the boy leaves her by dying. Because she followed his ritual faithfully, she's rewarded with everything a woman of the 90s could ever want to be blessed with: the great accomplishments of fame, glory, and money. Any guesses? Titanic. Now, I believe that Satan will tell 10 truths if he can fit in one lie. Great cinematography, powerful soundtrack, wonderful acting, just out of this world special effects, but maybe he'll fit in the message that maybe it's okay if you're really in love. In the gospel, we learn things line upon line, precept on precept, and I think Satan has a counterfeit. I had to force the rhyme, but I call it lie upon lie and decept on decept. And we can look right at it and not see the message, like a spiritual crocodile. Here's another story by a BYU religion teacher named Dennis Largy. He talked about a man that he introduced to the church years ago, tried to get him to join. Well, he took the discussions, but he didn't join, but he did decide to come to BYU. And one night, he called Brother Largy and said, "Would you meet me under the bleachers?" And said, yeah. Well, he went there, and let me just read what this friend said, or what Brother Largy said. A few years ago, my friend had seen a movie that was a graphic R-rated movie on the subject of demonic possession. Now a friend had asked him to see the sequel. And just the suggestion to see the second movie brought back vivid memories of the content of the first movie that at the time my friend had thought little about. Now, a few years later, and after a year's worth of church attendance, hasn't joined the church, but he's been coming. Something was somehow different. He went to bed but could not stop thinking about the movie. He became extremely nervous, began sweating profusely. Finally, about 2 o'clock in the morning, he reached over to his nightstand, picked up his copy of the Book of Mormon, and started to read. He said that as he read, the nervousness went away, and he calmed down and was able to fall asleep. The reason he asked me to meet him under the bleachers was to say, "What happened?" You can imagine I was most eager to explain. I testified to him that the Book of Mormon was true and that the light contained within its pages chased away the darkness that he was experiencing as he reflected on the evil contained within the movie. This last weekend I had a chance to drive up to Twin Falls. It's a lovely drive. In the daytime it was night, so all I could see was the freeway. But I took Sister Sherry Dew's book on CD, no doubt about it, and she told the coolest story in there. I might get some of the details wrong, but some adult friends of hers, maybe relatives, had a little boy in the car and they were driving in the dark when it was foggy. You ever driven in the fog and you see the kind of cool, you can only see 50 yards in front of you sometimes, but the 50 yards moves with you, you know what I mean? And the little boy in the back, I mean, sometimes kids say things and adults just go like, wow, that was profound. My little girl once that was 3 were listening to something and she said, "That music sounds mad." As my wife was surfing through radio stations, and I thought, that's right, it sounds mad. It's violent music. Well, anyway, this little boy said, "Dad, look, the light is pushing away the darkness." And the parents kind of, "Yes, son." "Dad, how does it do that?" And then he answered his own question. "I know, because light is stronger than dark." You can imagine the parents just, "Keep going, son. Get this down, Ethel." You know? And here's this. What did Brother Largy say? He read in the Book of Mormon, and the light chased away the darkness. Remember that phrase. Ready for prime time? It's going to get worse. That was part of under this heading. It's going to get worse. You'll find plenty of sex and horror. We rate 34 new TV series for their offensiveness quotient. Okay, sometimes, Mom, it's not that bad. It's just sex and violence. Think of it. What did Alma the Younger say to Corey Enton were the worst sins? Denying the Holy Ghost, murder, breaking law of chastity. Most of television is 2 and 3. Wouldn't you say? And they often deny the Holy Ghost, as we were just talking about. Not in maybe the same way, but by rarely mentioning God or anything religion. And when they do mention something religious, it's usually in a negative way. But look at that. Sex and violence, 2 and 3. What is the Lord's movie standard? Brother, by the way, there's nothing in the Scriptures that says you can't see bad movies. Oh, fa-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, there's plenty. Section 50. That which doth not edify is not of God, and is darkness. That which is of God is light. I say that you may know the truth, that you may chase darkness from among you. Look, Dad, the light is more powerful than the dark. That's what happened to that guy when he picked up the Book of Mormon and started to read it. Sometimes, like I said before, Hollywood will say, "Hey, we're just giving the people what they want." Oh, really? This is American Film Magazine, the July-August issue of 1988. Now, I know somebody who, when she was a teenager, she used to say "like" all the time. I was like, so like, and he was like, and I was like, and he was like, and I went over and he was like, and I was like, and so her family was so like annoyed that like all the time she would like say "like," that her family like every time she would like say "like," they would like clap. And so she'd say "like," and they'd clap, and she'd stop it, because she didn't realize how often she was saying it. I want you to clap every time you hear a personal pronoun. Now you have some help, because you'll see personal pronouns in red. But here's the question I want you to answer. Those listening on tape will not see them, but they'll hear you clap, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, that was a personal pronoun." This is Stephen Bochco, this interview, and the question was, with Hill Street and LA Law, you've really pushed the line as far as what you can do on network television. Bochco, we're going to go further. Question, you don't think you've already gone further than any other shows? Bochco, yeah, but not enough. I want more. Question, a lot of the dialogue is stuff that you never would have heard 5 years ago. Answer, that's true. It's actually beginning to sound like how grown-ups really talk. If you give me about 5 more years, lass, I think we'll get the rest of the way. I'll tell you what I'd love to be able to do on television. I'd love to have characters speak the way you and I do and use language that you and I use. You know, your vast array of 4-letter words that are common usage in virtually every venue of life, whether you're checking your groceries or in your college classroom. Don't you just read that and think, speak for yourself, potty mouth, you know. Okay? And I'd like us to be able to be sexier, legitimately sexier. I think that you're going to see all kinds of things in the next half dozen years on television that you can't even imagine today. Now, does it sound like he is very concerned about finding out what the public wants and giving them what they want? Or from all your clapping, does it sound like he has a very specific agenda in mind? See, it's very obvious. He's got a plan. Now, here's what's interesting. He said up there, if you give me about 5 more years. So, 5 years later, pick up the Deseret News, and it's exactly 5 years later, 1993, and it says, despite flinching, or we might say wincing just a bit, ABC chief will air NYPD Blue. Here's the close-up, an article by Scott Pierce. The president of ABC Entertainment admits he's not entirely comfortable with the contents of his network's upcoming NYPD Blue, but he still plans to let producer Stephen Bochco do what he wants with the series. And what Bochco wants includes a good deal of vulgar, crude language, partial nudity, and at least some rather graphic violence. We all have personal opinions about what we see on television, said Ted Harbert. There were a few words on that show that I flinched at a little bit, okay, but not enough to stop it. Yeah, it sounds like they're just falling all over themselves to give the public what they want. No, it sounds like they have their own agenda. Now, is Stephen Bochco still around? Here's another article in 2001 by Chris Hicks in the Deseret News. The new TV season is rolling out. Some producers have announced their intentions to push the envelope, which is, of course, a code phrase for making their shows even more raunchy and offensive. Isn't that funny how they say, let's push the envelope? And they don't say this is vulgar and raunchy. What they say is it's raw and edgy. Ooh, you know. We'd like to push them over the edgy sometimes, wouldn't we? Specifically, Aaron Sorkin, executive producer of NBC's The West Wing, and Stephen Bochco, creator of ABC's NYPD Blue in Philly, recently told the New York Times they want to introduce some heretofore banned language to primetime television. And you can bet that in this era of an ever-increasing vulgarity on the airwaves, it will happen soon. This is another. I was watching a Primetime Live, kind of a 60 Minutes type of show, and they said in 1976, they showed a clip from Happy Days, there were 2 sexual incidents per hour. In 1986, 10 years later, doubled to 4 incidents per hour. 1996, 8.5 incidents per hour. And so you have to think in 3 more years when it's 2006, what are we looking at? If the trend holds, we're up somewhere around 16 or 17. And if we're not careful, we can be so hypnotized that we can be looking right at the set and say, well, it's not that bad. And you young people, you're the ones that are going to be, some of you home for missions and young men's, young women's leaders when it's probably 16 or 17. What a great statement Elder Jeffrey R. Holland made back in October 2000 conference. He said, part of my warning voice tonight is that this will only get worse. It seems the door to permissiveness, the door to lewdness and vulgarity and obscenity swings only one way. What a good way to say it, a good visual way to say it. It only opens farther and farther. It never seems to swing back. You never see the newspaper article that says, television producers decide to have less swearing on television. No, they're always pushing the envelope, you know, and pushing us all over the edgy. Okay? Philo T. Farnsworth is the Latter-day Saint who invented television from Rigby, Idaho. And he said, I found this, I had heard that he said this, I have been looking for it forever, and I just found a source on the internet, an article. Television is a gift from God, Brother Farnsworth said, and he will hold those who utilize this divine instrument accountable to him. You know, there's things that we watch, like General Conference. I'm delighted. I mean, we have seminary videos now. They're so good, so well done. Some of the movies that they used to show when I was a kid, bless their hearts. I mean, the acting was, you know, it was just, and now you see these movies, you think, man, these guys are getting really good. And we're finally using this as a tool to help teach the gospel. We've got that DVD going out to people. And of course, I recognize that. That we could call television. for celestial vision. And then there's terrestrial vision and there's telestial vision, which we call television. Well, a lot of it seems to be television, but I like television better. That's just a little joke. I'll cut that out of the next time I give the talk. Look at these charts I have up here on the screen. Daily television viewing in 1960 was just about 5 hours per household. But in 1990, it's like, look how much it went up. 7.2 hours per household per day is what it's at now. So it's kind of like, welcome to Lagoon. You're going up the roller coaster now. And when do you go down? Oh, that's SAT scores. Okay? SAT scores in 1960 were at 975, and they go down to about 900 in 1990. Television watching goes up. SAT scores goes down. Is there a correlation? This is an article by Michael Morris that I found years ago. TV taking its bite out of academics. Most parents consider themselves involved in their children's education, but many admit that television is their kids' primary after-school tutor. I love this article by Harper Barnes of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Turn on the TV and bingo, you're brain dead, says the headline. Wait till you hear this. Watching television is like doing nothing at all, only more so. I love that line. It's like it's like the line, dancing is like standing still, only faster. Okay. Watching television is like doing nothing at all, only more so. That's essentially the conclusion Memphis psychologists came to after they wired up 31 kids, stuck them in front of a television set, turned on the Wonder Years, and watched their vital signs plunge. The metabolic rate during television viewing was even lower than it was during rest, the psychologists reported. You could lose more weight taking a nap? How did you lose all that weight? Oh, I slept. I used to watch television. Now I sleep the pounds away. Does the Lord care about how we spend our time? Notice how many of these verses I found. Let every man be diligent in all things, and the idler shall not have place in the church, except he repent and mend his ways. When I drove up here, I stopped at several stoplights. When I stop at a stoplight, what do we say my engine is doing? It's idling. There's tremendous power there. Power that could take my car to 90 miles an hour, although I would never do that because that would be speeding. But probably enough, I don't know, my 4Runner's actually kind of gutless, but maybe it could go fast. I know it can go 65. Tremendous power to move all that weight, but when I'm sitting a light, here's all this power doing nothing. All this potential power is just idle. And think of that word when we look at these. And I see teenagers and I think, whoa, look at the power. Look at the potential in that young woman. Look at the potential in that young man. And so it's hard for your parents, your leaders, to see you sometimes being idle. Let's look at another one. This is section 68, verse 31. Now I, the Lord, am not well pleased with the inhabitants of Zion, for there are idlers among them. And their children are also growing up in wickedness. They also seek not earnestly the riches of eternity, the spiritual treasures, but their eyes are full of greediness. For what? The worldly treasures, I guess. Okay, section 42, verse 42. How much clearer can it be? Thou shalt not be idle. For he that is idle shall not eat the bread, nor wear the garments of the laborer. Section 60, verse 13. Thou shalt not idle away thy time, neither shalt thou bury thy talent, that it may not be known. Isn't that interesting? The Lord wants your talents to be known. What possible reason would he have for that? Probably to teach the gospel, to change the world. You were sent here to change the world, not to let the world change you, teenagers. And so you have a For the Strength of Youth book. You were created in God's image, but Satan wants to remake you in the world image. And you take world lessons sometimes when you're watching the wrong kind of television. Here's another verse. I just like this phrase. It's from Alma 34:33. If we do not improve our time, what an interesting phrase. While in this life, then cometh the night of darkness wherein there can be no labor performed. What about video games? Well, here's what Elder Ballard said recently. Limit the amount of time spent playing computer games. How many kills you can make in a minute with a computer game will have zero effect on your capacity to be a good missionary. An article last month in the Ensign, this is the June 2003 Ensign, said this: violent video games might be even more harmful than violent TV programs. While television viewing is usually a passive activity, video game playing is highly interactive. Most violent video games require the player to take on the identity of a violent game character, and most of these games reward individuals for behaving aggressively. Now listen to your gift of the Holy Ghost for a second and listen to this phrase. For example, players get points for killing people. Next paragraph. The violence portrayed in these video games is almost continuous. Scientific research has shown that violent video games increase aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Lamentably, the most popular video games are violent ones. Let me just read some things. Somebody at work, where I work, shared with me something. I had never heard of this before, but these are extreme examples about a computer internet game called EverQuest. EverQuest has proved so engrossing, gamers casually refer to it as EverCrack. This is an article in the San Francisco Chronicle. Sean was consumed, his mother said. It came to the point we could not get him out of the game. He moved into his own apartment, devoted his life to the online fantasy world of wizards, warriors, and elves. After a while, he stopped leaving the apartment. He quit work. He even stopped buying groceries. His mother finally moved into a group home for people with addictions. Well, finally, when he was gone, Sean moved into his own apartment, bought a used computer, and his life once again spiraled out of control. He chained the door shut. For 2 weeks, he didn't answer his phone. He cut himself off from reality. On Thanksgiving 2001, his mother cut the chain on her son's door. She found him dead from a .22 caliber gunshot. He was lying in front of the computer. EverQuest was still on the screen. 430,000 subscribers to this game. Of the 42 million people living in South Korea, 2 million play a game called Lineage. It involves a medieval world in which knights join together in clans, storming castles and vanquishing foes. And I don't know, maybe that sounds really romantic or challenging or something. I'll tell you what's challenging. 3 kids under the age of 4. That's what I got, man. That you want an adventure game. Get some toddlers, man. That's awesome. That's fun. We're potty training our son this week. Man, that's adventure, I'll tell you. And this brother says, wait till you have teenagers. No. Hit escape, hit escape. Okay. Let's see, here's another one. The game's called Lineage, of storming castles and vanquishing foes. In October, one South Korean man sat at a computer screen in the Kwonju Internet Cafe, enraptured by Lineage. Neglecting food and sleep, he played nonstop for 86 hours. He was found on the floor dead from exhaustion. Days later, a 27-year-old man was found on the floor of a bathroom in an internet cafe in Taiwan. Unconscious, bleeding from his nose. He had played Lineage for 32 hours straight. And there's more of these, and some of them are just so incredibly sad. Let me just read this one. This is from a Dr. Marissa Hecht-Orzak, who has a site called Computer Addiction Services. She said, people play video games either to relax or to be excited. Anything that changes your mood can be addicting. People have to make priorities and keep any activity from getting out of hand. Yeah, here's a kid that's 17 years old and posted this plea for help. After 3 years on this game from the ages of 14 to 17, it's my birthday today, March 3rd. I have spent around 150 hours gameplay time on EQ, EverQuest. I know this may not be the right place for that, but if any of you can snap me back into reality, it would be very nice. I never had many friends. I actually have more friends over EQ than I do in real life. Any ideas on helping me get off this game? I don't play for fun. I play for fear of missing something and falling behind. Email at me if you have any ideas. Now, these are, I hope, extreme examples, but let me just read one more from Wired.com, Wired News. A guy named Ruben, a software engineer from Washington, played Civilization for 7 straight years after a college dorm friend gave him the installation discs. At the time, the ability to create an alternate world was a refreshing break from the routine of student life. For the first week, he said, I didn't sleep. He's also posted his experience online. It says, it was worse than being on crack. I'd always get a sinking feeling when I looked out the window and saw it was dawn. I'd be angry at myself for being such a loser because the game was controlling my life. And that's the thing. Loser might sound like a harsh word, but you're losing time. You're idling. That potential that you have is gone. And that's where we need to be careful. And this talk's going to get a lot more fun in a minute, but hang on. Don't miss heaven for the world. Hollywood always says, turn off the TV. This part of the talk is called, your home will be happier with less TV and less video games. The Lord said, section 53, verse 2, Behold, I, the Lord, who was crucified for the sins of the world, give unto you a commandment that you shall forsake the world. A lot of this stuff is worldly, and maybe even if it's not evil, maybe there's some shows that are. I know there's some that aren't. But maybe it's a distraction from other wonderful things that you could be doing. Hollywood always says, if you don't like it, then turn it off. And we say, wow, something useful came out of Hollywood. If you don't like it, turn it off. What an idea. TV Guide did a survey years ago. Notice how they worded it. Would you give up TV for $1 million? In this special and fun survey, we find out how America secretly feels about its wondrous, maddening love affair with the tube. And then here's the results in the BYU's newspaper came out. The top little television you see there. 23% of Americans would give up all television watching permanently for $25,000. In the middle, 46% would have to be paid at least $1 million. And on the bottom, in the get a life of your own category, 25% would not do it even for $1 million. And you'll notice some other stats. Nearly 2 in 3 Americans often watch TV while eating dinner, and men are twice as likely as women to hold the remote control. 41% to 19%, it was shared in 20% of homes. Look at this article. Turning off the tube may be the first step towards turning on life by James A. Herrick of the Scripps Howard News Service, and I loved this paragraph. When I watch television, I am investing uncompensated time as a commercials viewer, and my time is being sold by an advertiser to a network. No thanks. I've got better things to do. Oh, touchdown. I've got better things to do. I agree. Network's time. Listen, Groucho Marx said, I find television very educating. Every time someone turns on the set, I go in the other room and read a book. Great quote. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not the least bit interested in helping Hollywood reach its goals, or Hollywood reach its goals. How about you? What did people do before television? Well, people used to talk to each other. What happens when somebody talks when a show's on? Shh! Quiet, you stupid, I missed it, right? People talk to each other. People made things like paintings, gardens, furniture, music. People read books, letting their imagination fill in the music and the action. People used to write letters and record their lives in journals. People enjoyed nature rather than videos of nature. People actually went outside and played sports instead of watching other people play sports. Stephen Covey, this is a great quote. I was down in Provo once and somebody pointed me up in the mountain and said, look, you see that house up there? And I'm not sure if this is true. They said, that's Stephen Covey's house. And I looked and it had all these chimneys. And I said, look, the 7 chimneys of highly effective houses. And they didn't think it was that funny either. Okay. Here's what Stephen Covey said in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Too many vacations that last too long. Too many movies, too much TV, too much video game playing, too much undisciplined leisure time in which a person continually takes the course of least resistance gradually wastes a life. It ensures that a person's capacities stay dormant, that talents remain undeveloped, and that the mind and the spirit become lethargic, and that the heart is unfulfilled. Even the Lord says that thy talent may be known. Don't idle away your time so that your talents can be known. But remember, in all of this, TV is not the enemy, Satan is. But he's found a way to use television as a weapon. And in our homes, we have to make sure it's a tool and not a weapon. Satan is working under such perfect disguise, the first presidency said, that many do not recognize either him or his methods. Listen to this quote. There's no crime he would not commit, no debauchery he would not set up, no plague he would not send, no heart he would not break, no life he would not take, no soul he would not destroy. He comes as a thief in the night. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Satan works in such perfect disguise. You can be looking right at it and not see. Now, let's lighten up a little bit. President Hinckley said, I am suggesting that we spend a little less time in idleness, in the fruitless pursuit of watching some inane and empty television programs. Time so utilized can be put to better advantage, and the consequences, this is a prophet talking, the consequences will be wonderful. Of that I do not hesitate to assure you. Elder Ballard said once, research data indicate that families that limit television viewing to a maximum of 2 hours a day, and I'd throw in there video game too, of carefully selected programs may see the following significant changes in family relationships. Value setting will be taught and reinforced by the family. Relationships between parents and youth will increase. Homework will be completed with less pressure of time. Personal conversations will increase. Children's imaginations will come back to life. Each family member will become a discriminating selector and evaluator of programs. That is so true, because if you know I've only got 2 hours today between my video and my TV, You'll say, I want to just see this show. You won't just channel surf. Have you ever watched a TV show that's just totally stupid and you watched it anyway? And you're with your brother or sister. That's so stupid. I know it would never happen. Okay, be quiet. Okay. And you watch it. Oh, sure, that's so dumb. I know. Be quiet. Okay. And you end up just watching a movie that was so stupid because you didn't choose. You didn't become a discriminator of programs. Parents can become family leaders again, and good reading habits may be substituted for television viewing. Speaking of reading habits, I love this story. I read this by Dr. Jean-Louis Rodolphe Angazine. Okay, I don't expect he's from around these parts. Okay, I think he's a French bird, French fly, French toast. Jean-Louis Rodolphe Angazine. Okay, and he was a botanist and a naturalist in the 19th century, and he gave this lecture. And this woman came up to him afterwards, and she said, Dr. Agassi, I never had a chance. He said, what do you mean? She said, this is what I said. I never had a chance in life. He said, well, what do you do? She said, I'm single and I run a boarding house with my sister. He said, what do you do there? She said, well, mostly I peel potatoes and chop onions. He said, where do you sit? She said, on the bottom stair in the cellar. He said, where do your feet rest? And she said, on the glazed brick on the floor. And he took out his card and he said, Madam, I want you to write me a letter and tell me about the brick under your feet. And you can only imagine. She takes the card. You want me to write you a letter about a brick? What do you get? The brick is brown and it's hard. You smack your head on it, it hurts a lot. What are you going to write to a professor about a brick? So that night she pulled out the dictionary and she looked up the word brick, and it said, brick is a piece of baked clay. And she thought, well, I can't write this professor back and say brick is a piece of baked clay. I better find out more. So she went to the library. Perhaps you've heard of it. Big building, lots of books. In the library, she pulled out, not the dictionary, she had one of those at home, the encyclopedia, and she looked up the word brick, and it said, brick is vitrified kaolin and hydrous aluminum silicate, as we all know. And she thought, I don't know what that means, so she kept reading. And then she discovered, this is maybe too much excitement so early in the evening, so hold on to your chair. She discovered there was a museum of brick near her home. He just about blew the roof off the place, but fortunately the contractors did a good job. So she went to the Museum of Brick, took a notepad, discovered that there's about 120 different kinds of brick. Brick comes from clay, a certain kind of soil, and if you mold it just right and bake it in a super hot oven called a kiln, and if it cures and hardens correctly, you can make stuff out of it, like schools and churches and homes. And she finally went home, took her notes, and started her letter to Dr. Jean-Louis Rodolphe Angazine. And 36 pages later, she was done. She wrote 36 pages, sent it to Dr. Agassi, and he wrote back and he said, Dear Madam, this is one of the finest articles I have ever seen on brick. And I know what you're thinking, yeah, it's probably the only article he'd ever seen on brick. I mean, how many of you woke up this morning, I wish I knew more about brick. There's just this void in my life, you know. But he wrote the letter and he said, if you'll allow me to make a few changes, which I've marked in your manuscript, he said, I think I can get it published and I'll send you the money. And what would you say? Okay, that's fine. I knew I could make money writing about bricks. But he sent her, I don't know where he published it, Brick World magazine or something. But he sent her a check for about $250. And a note with the check said, Madam, what was under the brick? And she wrote back in one word. She said, ants. And he wrote back and he said, tell me about ants. Oh, man. Yeah, exactly. So she went back to the library. She found out that there's between 1,800 and 2,200 different kinds of ants. They're ants so small you can get 3 of them on the head of a pin. There are ants that are an inch long that march in armies a mile wide, wiping out everything in their path. There are peasant ants that keep cow ants to milk and take the milk to the aristocrat ants in the neighborhood. I know, that's a weird ant. And some of you are going, I have a weird aunt and a weird uncle. And we all do. There are ants that build ant hills so small that you could cover them with a thimble. And finally, she sat down and wrote 360 pages about ants and sent it to Dr. Agassi. And he wrote back and published it as a book, sent her all of the money, and she went to travel all the lands of her dreams on the proceeds of her work. Listen to President Hinckley. And the consequences will be wonderful. Of that, I did not hesitate to assure you. If Dr. Agassi would have been kind of impressed with himself, he may have just sat her down and said, let me tell you everything I know. This could take several months. But instead, he showed her that she already had 2 talents. She could read and she could write. And if you can read and you can write, the whole world is open to you. I spoke up in Layton once at some sort of reading across America thing. And Lieutenant Governor Olene Walker was there. And she said the best thing. She said, right now to the elementary school kids, right now you're learning to read, and next you will read to learn. You learn to read, then you read to learn. And I thought, yeah, that's good. Now I have to tell you the rest of the story that I can't tell in the schools. I discovered this and just went, oh, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. I have to tell somebody. But just remember, before the Salt Lake Temple was completed, they completed the one in St. George. And if you remember correctly, Wilford Woodruff was down there one night. And do you remember who appeared to him? The signers of the Declaration of Independence. And said, you've had use of the endowment house for all of these years. Why have you never done the work for us? We set up the country that you now enjoy. We have never, the Constitution, we haven't apostatized from it. How come the work hasn't been done for us? And Wilford Woodruff says, I straightway went into the baptismal font and called upon Brother McAllister to baptize me for the signers of the Declaration of Independence and 50 other eminent men, making 100 in all, including John Wesley, John and Charles Wesley, founders of eventually the movement that became the Methodist Church, Columbus, and others. I then baptized him for every president of the United States except 3. And when their cause is just, somebody will do the work for them. Now, you have to... No, it's funnier than you think. Because Joseph Smith, you might know this. Joseph Smith went to Martin Van Buren and asked for him to help the saints. And Martin Van Buren said, your cause is just, but I can do nothing for you. Why, if I took up for you, I'd lose the vote of Missouri. So he's the one that said, your cause is just, I can do nothing for you. So Wilford Woodruff says, I'll do these presidents, and except for 3. And when their cause is just, somebody will do the work for them. We'll just let you rot in the spirit world for a while. Think about doing your work later. Now, the reason I showed you this is because, isn't that just awesome? That's another touchdown, man. It's 14-0. Okay. 50 other eminent men. Guess who one of those 50 other men was? Dr. Jean-Louis Rudolph Agassiz. Is that the coolest thing? I couldn't tell you that at school, but that just is so cool to me that he was one of them. I know that for a couple of reasons. One, I bought a book about 50 other eminent men. And the other, I verified it with my wife's family's next door neighbor. When I got my marriage temple recommend interview, I went over to see her stake president, President Wilford B. Woodruff, who goes by Bruce Woodruff, who has access to all the journals. So that's fun. Okay. On with the talk. Why do we want to watch other people live their dreams on television? Anyway, we've talked about how it's a waste of time, spiritual poison, maybe intellectual poison, but it's also, a waste of time. The average teenager watches 3.5 hours per day. What if you used those hours to work on your dreams instead of watching other people work on theirs? Now, I have to tell you, this is a little bit personal, but it's the best way I can think to tell you. When I was 16 years old, walked into Highland High School's in Salt Lake City's library looking for a book about just making it through high school. And I didn't mean academically. I did fine there, but just making it. I had terrific acne. I mean, I could show you pictures. I would never show you the pictures, but I have them. Okay? I was the Oxy-10 poster child. But, and I just wanted a book, and I couldn't find one. And I remember as a little 16-year-old thinking, one day I'll write that book. Well, there I am at BYU. I'm working at continuing education. And thought, when am I ever going to do that book? And then one day I looked at my day, 8 hours at continuing education. I thought, when am I ever going to do this? And the only time I could think of was early in the morning. So I decided I would go to bed at 10. And that meant I would miss all that worthwhile channel surfing from 10 to midnight that I usually did. The news, Leno, Letterman, whatever was on. I would miss all that surfing. What a sacrifice. So I set my alarm to get up at 5. And my alarm, it used to be a radio, and then I found this quotation, and President Hinckley woke me up. I had this really cool boombox that you could wake up to a cassette or a CD. Well, I programmed it with this quote. Now imagine trying to stay asleep when you hear this at 5 in the morning, okay? When you hear President Hinckley say, I eventually found a tape of this at the DI of the actual conference talk. One of the great tragedies we witness almost daily is the tragedy of men of high aim and low achievement. Their motives are noble, their proclaimed ambition is praiseworthy, their capacity is great, but their discipline is weak. They succumb to indolence. Appetite robs them of will. Just try and stay in bed. I just get there. I don't want to go to heaven and have President Hinckley, or to the next life and have President Hinckley say, "What a tragedy. Look at him." You know? His capacity was great. His motives were noble. His proclaimed ambition was praiseworthy, but he just wanted to sleep and veg and channel surf. He succumbed to indolence. Appetite robbed him of will. That got me out of bed every morning at 5. And you know what I did to reward myself? Tropicana orange juice. You know, the fresh squeezed stuff? Only if I got up at 5, I got to have a glass. And then I'd be walking in that parking lot by the Harmon building, and I'd be just tired some mornings, and it was dark outside. And so I'd have to think of something else to help motivate myself to get in there and sit down and write. And that was a Longfellow quote that I heard. "The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night." That helped. I'm walking in there, it's winter time, and I'd sit down, and I discovered that writing is hard, and some days for 2 hours, from 6 to 8, by the time I showered and got up and everything and got there, sometimes I get out a paragraph. On a really good day, I could get out maybe a couple of pages. But finally, after about a month or two, I had enough that I faxed a chapter to Deseret Book, and I got a message from Sister Dew, and she said on the message, "We want to see the rest of this." And just that sentence got me so excited. It was a little easier to get up down the Tropicana and go, right? And sit there and write. And it was a wonderful time in my life. People say, "What are you doing these days?" I didn't define it by the 8 hours that I worked. I defined it by those 2 hours where I had shut off television, traded my least productive time, 10 to midnight, for my most productive time, 6 to 8. And that's how I defined my life. And I told them, "Okay, I'll have it to you on this date." And I'll never forget bringing that manuscript up. And this is why I like to refer to them as Deseret Book. They published it. And I'm not even going to tell you the title because that's not why I'm telling you the story. But I remember one day walking in and seeing that on the shelf and just thinking, I wrote that. Oh, sure. And thinking my English teachers would just, fall over if they saw. Now, that's a risky story to tell because I sound kind of self-congratulatory, but here's my question. Let's say I had watched TV for those 4 months. What would I have to show for it? I can't think of a thing. Maybe I could remember a joke. I can't think of a thing I would have had to show for it. And then my brain's kind of slow, but I thought, "Gee, John, here's an idea. Why don't you just do this for the rest of your life? Why do you watch other people live their dreams, actors, athletes, in Hollywood? Why don't you turn it off and live some of your own?" Now, I told this story because now I want to turn the focus on you. You're young. I'm sad to tell you this. I play the guitar today about as well as I did when I was 18. I went on a mission. I came home. I got busy. I got into school. I'm a dad now. I just don't have the time to practice. And I have not had the time to work on that talent beyond what I was 18. I'm saying start now and start turning that thing off and developing some of those talents. Some of you love sports. Great. Go out and shoot free throws for a couple hours. And how much better could you become doing that in a month for 2 hours a day, huh? Except for Sunday, of course. How much better, what if some of you like to sew, some of you like to paint or draw, some of you like to write. Some of you maybe like to make music, the piano, the clarinet, the guitar. My wife bought me a banjo right after my little girl Ashley was born, and I confess I've learned one song, and it's just been sitting in the closet. It drives me crazy because life gets busy, your priorities change, and that's fine. I'm just saying now is the time to work on some of those talents because then the Lord can use those that you've developed to build the kingdom and to bless other people. But time's short. I hope you'll take that to heart. The thing that's so interesting is sometimes when I hear kids at EFY for example, say, wow, that was the best week of my life, or a missionary comes home, wow, that was the best 2 years of my life, and especially at EFY, I want to grab the kids and say, I want you to notice something. Notice what you just said, and notice that was a week with no television. That was a week with no movies. That was a week when you read your scriptures every day. That was a week when you were surrounded by the gospel. Missionaries, the same thing. And you're saying, that was the best time of my life? Gee, you mean the gospel will really make us happy? Wow. What a concept, right? But it's right there in front, but sometimes we don't see. We limit some of those things and focus on the other things. Oh, wow. It could really change our life. For more statistics, if you want some, go to tvturnoff.org, and they've got pages of interesting stats about how things have changed, what you can do and be and become and be different by turning it off. I just hope that you will go home. Some of you that have your patriarchal blessing right now, get it out and read it. You'll notice there's nothing in there that says watch more television. You'll notice there's nothing in there that says, play more video games. There are things in there about your possibilities and your potential. You can't realize those things when you're sitting idle, being a couch potato or a sofa spud or a recliner russet or a floor fungi or a video game vegetable or a PlayStation prune or an internet imbecile. That's all of them I could think of. The thing that's so interesting to me, too, about my own story is my whole life changed because for 4 months I decided to turn off the TV from 10 to midnight. Changed my life, changed my career, changed what I do now because I didn't see the news or Leno or Letterman or whatever was on there. I don't even think they noticed that I didn't watch their shows. They never call or write. They've never come to any of my firesides. Why should I devote myself to watching them work? Do you know what I mean? And I just think in that way you can be a little bit more selfish in a way and say, the Lord has told me I have gifts and talents and abilities inside. Maybe I can discover those and the Lord can use me to bless people. And that's why you were sent to this earth. And you have talents and abilities that are in there. They won't be developed by watching television. I really don't think so. I think there's other things that you can do to go out there and bless the world. You can either change the world or let the world change you. I say turn off the TV, get a life of your own. Listen to President Hinckley. The consequences will be wonderful. Of that I do not hesitate to assure you. Jesus said, I've come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. The abundant life is not found sitting on the couch with the remote. The abundant life is somewhere else. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Was this useful? Did you learn something from that? Do you feel motivated? I hope so, because man, I got so excited about that idea of trading least productive time for most, and I think, could you do that? And who knows what you've got inside. Please don't be the great potential and power that's sitting there idle, because you've all got it. It's in there, but you won't find it sitting on the couch watching television. So let me just review those first things we talked about. Families and the law of chastity are under attack in the media. Much of the present programming is spiritual poison. Much of it's intellectual poison, and it's going to get worse. We all know that. And your life will be better with less television. I used to challenge people to turn off TV, movies, and videos for a month, because I tried that once. Yes, I use February, and it's the shortest month, but it's a month. And it was amazing. And every time I've given this, when I've focused on television, moms and dads always say, talk about video games, talk about video games. So I'd say 2 hours for both, But get a life of your own. You've got so much to give out there, and I hope you will do that. And I believe the Lord will bless you as you do. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.